we've got one of the presentations that I've been the most excited about. I've told you guys about it because I'm totally pumped because I think this is an important issue. A lot of people in the blockchain space are excited about the possibility of blockchain to free people from governments, to free people from central banks. But what about people that are not free from the point of a machine gun? People that are literally being shackled to work in a factory, to work in a brothel as sex slaves. The Mekong Club is out there fighting modern day slavery. They are doing it, and they are using blockchain and a new solution that is going to help to fight this modern scourge. So ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply honored to have coming to the stage today from the Mekong Club, Ms. Phoebe Ewen. Phoebe, please come and tell us what you're up to.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for Phoebe Ewen of the Mekong Club. Thank you.
Thank you. So this week is all about innovation, new technology, and blockchain technology changing the world. And I'm really, really glad and really grateful to have 10 minutes to talk to you today about a cause that I really deeply believe can benefit from the collective brain power of forward thinkers and innovators like yourselves in the room today. My plan is not only to introduce to you a project that we at the Mekong Club have been working with DigiNext here in Hong Kong, but also to inspire you as individuals to consider how blockchain technology can be applied as a force for positive social change. Today, I am talking about combating modern-day slavery. So this is my personal issue, something I personally am very, very passionate about. My background is in the corporate financial services world, so I actually left because I became incredibly frustrated with the slow pace of change and the lack of people really out there doing stuff to make a difference in this space. When I talk about modern slavery, I'm talking about an all-encompassing term that covers a number of crimes, from human trafficking, forced labor, and bonded labor, and so on. In the world today, there are 40.3 estimated victims of modern-day slavery. That's 40.3 million people who are being forced to work against their will. Now, how are these people getting into this situation? We call it modern-day slavery because instead of the shackles and chains that maybe you're naturally conjuring up in your minds when you think about this, we have people that are being forced into work by taking on excessive debts. They're being forced into work due to threats of violence against themselves and their families, and even being forced, for example, by their managers taking away personal documents such as their passports, work permits, and employment contracts to force them to stay in the labor situation. Modern-day slavery is a factory worker who has left home trying to find a job to provide for their family. They're approached by an employment broker, they pay a fee to get some work, they arrive at the factory, their passport is taken away from them. Very, very quickly, they're told they owe debts to their new manager. They don't have their passport, they can't escape. They're in the country illegally, and they must stay, and they must work for little or no pay. Modern-day slavery is women and children being forced into the commercial sex trade. Unfortunately, we live in a society where it's now possible to rent someone else's body for just a few dollars an hour. Many of these people are being forced into this situation day in and day out. Modern-day slavery is migrant workers going onto fishing boats, going out to sea and not coming back for years. They're not being paid for their work, and if they try to rebel, they're pushed overboard and murdered. Modern-day slavery is children being forced to work in mines to mine the metal and minerals that used to make our computers and our smartphones. I could go on and on, but I've only got 10 minutes. To summarize, modern-day slavery affects virtually every single supply chain and affects every single country in the world. Absolutely no country is immune to this issue. Just to go back to this figure of 40.3 million, and I hope this is as shocking to you as it was to me when I first found this out, because every one of these people is someone just like me or you who's gone out into the world to try and make a living for themselves or for their families, and they've been exploited along the way. Despite the combined, very hard-working efforts of NGOs, of the government, of public sector, private sector organizations, we have 40.3 million people in modern slavery today, but we're only helping 0.2% of victims each year. Now, this is another very, very shocking statistic, because we live in a world where we've sent a man to the moon. If anything, that's almost old news. We have conferences like this where we get together and we discuss how incredible all of the new technology around us is. And yet we still can't seem to eradicate forced and child labor in the very supply chains of the clothes that we're wearing and the computers that we're using to write up these reports about how great this technology is. So there is some good news, and that is that the world is starting to wake up to this issue. So, as I mentioned before, I work for an NGO here in Hong Kong. We're called the Mekong Club, and we work very closely with the private sector. We work with some of the largest retailers and manufacturers in the world, and they really do want to change things. No reasonable business wants to knowingly have modern slavery within their supply chains. We work with these guys to identify new and innovative solutions to help them better understand their supply chains and better identify and help victims as quickly as they possibly can. So let's look at the issue a little bit more in depth. If we take factory workers, for example, working in garment factories, you've got a few different factors that contribute to a victim's higher risk of ending up in a modern slavery situation. So within the garment industry, we often have workers using multiple employment agencies to secure a job. In this case, they will often have to pay fees to secure this job. And when they're using multiple agencies, these fees can very, very quickly rack up, and they often take on personal debt as a result. There's often cross-border migration, so people moving from one country to another to secure a job in the garment industry. We see a high number of instances where factory owners or agencies are confiscating workers' employment documents. So that might be their work permit, their employment contract, or their passport and visa. Now, this immediately puts the worker on the back foot because they don't have access to their personal information and their ID. If they were to try and escape and go to the police, they're often too fearful to do so because they can't prove they are who they are and they're there for the reasons that they say they are. In addition, many factories will use subcontractors for their labor, so there's multiple layers of accountability when it comes to labor abuses. Furthermore, the audit process that is used by companies to keep checks and balances on worker conditions is deeply flawed. The audit process is very, very manual. It relies on bits of paper, and it's very, very time-consuming. So most large companies aren't able to carry out audits, even on all of their tier 1 suppliers, let alone beyond that. So all of this together really shows that there's a lack of trust, transparency, and security in the current situation when it comes to worker recruitment. And this is leaving workers highly, highly vulnerable to modern slavery situations. So the Mekong Club has teamed up with DigiNex, a blockchain solutions provider here in Hong Kong, to tackle just one of these issues to start with, and that's the issue of employment contract abuse. So I've mentioned this a few times now. We see many, many cases where employment contracts of workers are confiscated for them when they arrive in the place of work, or they're changed by agencies as the worker makes the journey from starting to look for a job to signing a contract to starting a job. Contracts might be lost, or in the very worst cases, workers don't have an employment contract at all. So together with DigiNex, we have created the eMin app. Now, very, very simply put, the eMin app allows for an immutable copy of the worker's employment contract to be stored on the blockchain. Now, it's a very, very simple UI, and it fits into existing recruitment practices. So at the point where the contract is signed, it can be scanned, or a photograph can be taken of the contract, and it can be uploaded onto the blockchain. The contract has to be approved via the app by both the worker and by the employer and any third-party agencies. When all parties have approved that this contract is in fact the official and legitimate version of the employment contract, it's uploaded onto the Ethereum blockchain using the application. Additional functionality includes features like permissioning for third parties, such as auditors, so they're able to see selective information about workers when they're carrying out their spot checks on factories. This cuts down on the existing heavy paperwork and heavily manual process that we see today. So how does EMIN actually combat modern-day slavery? Well, workers now have access to a secure copy of their employment contract that has been verified. This may seem like a very, very simple thing to those of you that have access to your contracts. They're in your drawer at your desk at work, they're in your emails, it's fine. For a factory worker, it's a very, very different situation. The worker is now equipped, if they need to make a grievance report or if there's a labor dispute, with their own copy of their employment contract. It's a permanent record. It cannot be deleted, it cannot be confiscated, it cannot be altered without a record being made, and it cannot be lost. It can also be shared between other parties, such as the agencies, departments, auditors, and buyers that the worker is dealing with. And in addition, we can also collect aggregate data about entire supply chains who are using EMIN. So we can begin to understand trends in worker movement and migration patterns, pay patterns, even things like gender disparity. And fundamentally, and very importantly, this creates entirely greater visibility for those buyers looking to really understand what is happening within their factories, within their supply chains. So, who is also using EMIN? We're starting by equipping those ethical agencies and companies that want to really demonstrate a commitment to trust and transparency and security within their recruitment processes. And this is especially useful for those migrant workers that are dealing with multiple agencies along the way. We do appreciate that blockchain will not eliminate the fact that there are bad guys in the world who want to exploit people. But we really, really want to make it much harder for them to be profiting from people's desire just to have a job. So we recently returned from Phuket in Thailand. You can see a picture here where we've been implementing EMIN in shrimp farms, just to demonstrate to buyers that workers within these shrimp farms have employment contracts. A very simple thing, but in the Thai aquaculture industry, this is actually incredibly rare. So it's a first step in the right direction for an entire industry. So this is just one practical use case of how blockchain technology can combat modern-day slavery. I just want to bring us back to the 40.3 million people of which we are currently helping 0.2%. I'm sure you will all agree we need to start making a dent in that figure, and we need to start making a dent now. We need to stop talking about what can be done and start doing things. We've started with a very, very simple issue of employment contracts, but as the world continues to wake up, continues to embrace blockchain technology, we're really excited to see where this project is going to go. So I encourage you to check out the EMIN project website, which is up here on the screen right now. Here you can get involved with the project, you can follow us on your journey, and you can find out more about the technology itself. So that was just a brief 10 minutes. I hope I've given you a little bit of food for thought in terms of the challenges that we're currently facing at the Mekong Club and the challenges that the companies that we work with are facing. And please feel free to grab me after this, and I won't bite, to ask any questions about the project or about the Mekong Club. Thank you.
All right. Phoebe, don't run away, guys. One more time. I know she said it. Please do take a moment, come and talk to her. If you think that there's anything you can do to support the work they're doing at the Mekong Club, really, I strongly encourage you to do that. When the people at Diginex came to us, because it's all the blockchain community, and they said, listen, we have somebody who really want to speak, and they said we think this is important. We said yes, please. So, Phoebe, thank you so much for coming. Keep up the great work that you're doing. It's really amazing and inspiring.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.